Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. It's a really nice day outside. I'm sure it's still freezing, but nice is good, right? We're going to get started in today's training in just a split second. Let me turn off some of these captions that are running around. But before we do, I just like to give some sort of tip for the people showing up early and on time. And when you do that, I really appreciate you for doing that. It just helps LinkedIn push the word out further to say, hey, the live's live, right? Let's get started. So my tip for you today is just a reminder, if you didn't see it, two things about content I recently pushed out. One is that I pushed out content on the artificial intelligence. So yesterday I pushed out a newsletter and there was 3 different artificial intelligence strategic plans in there. One was from the national level. The other was from the Department of Veterans Affairs, and the other one was from HHS. And the reason this is important, it's a tip for you, and I really want you to dive in, is I believe everybody, no matter what you sell, including construction, right, should be looking at artificial intelligence, machine learning, et cetera, emerging technologies and go, how can they be integrated into what I sell to the government? So if I just use elevators as one of my previous customers does, and it's like the farthest away from technology, if you think about elevators, I would be looking at AI going, well, how can I manage the data that's coming out of elevators to manage the costs or manage the safety of the elevators, et cetera? And if I didn't know much about it, I would first go back to Otis Elevator and say, hey, Otis, you guys are manufacturing. Are you thinking about how AI is fitting in the world? And so think about what you do for the government and begin to add an AI play. You don't need to be the AI expert. There's lots of AI companies out there. Maybe some of them are here today and they'll mention that in the chat. But when you add a level of thinking around AI, you're really going to be able to help the government. So it's just a quick tip for those of you showing up early and on time. I appreciate it. By the way, somebody's already beat me to the punch there. Today, I'm going to be talking about, and I'll probably forget to say this, so I'm glad Frank and some others are mentioning this, that I put into the chat. If you didn't see this, scroll all the way up to the chat or the comments in today's training. If you're here live today, I'm going to talk about why buyers are ignoring you, and it's because it's basically you're visible. If you want me to do a visibility gap analysis and send you a report on that, a basic report on your company, put your cage code or UEI into the chat. And after the live, we'll write down whoever was here live and put their information in, and we'll send you a report. It's a perfect way for us to be able to just constantly be able to help companies like you and improve the training that I do. Okay, enough talking. Let me share my screen and we're going to get off to the races. Actually, I'm not sharing my screen just yet. Let's get started with the training. So one of the things I hear from government contractors all the time, right, is I'm doing all the right things. I feel like I'm going to all the right events, but I'm not seeing the results I expect. And that's a question I have for you, right? Do you feel like you're doing all the right things, but you're not seeing the results you expect? There's a reason behind it. And I'm always talking about process, and I want to talk about process again today. There's a great line that I love from a guy named Joseph Heller, who wrote a book called Catch-22. And the quote is, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you, right? And I like spinning that around for today's training and talk about just because you're paranoid that you're being ignored doesn't mean the federal buyers not ignoring you. So just because you're paranoid that you're being ignored by the federal buyer doesn't mean they're not ignoring you. They probably are ignoring you. But the cool thing is it's not in your mind, right? It's in the process. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to give you 20 reasons why federal buyers might be ignoring you. I might be giving you more than 20 reasons. And the one thing that I'm going to ask you to do is to take responsibility for your visibility, for your company's visibility, et cetera. When you take responsibility, you put yourself in the driver's seat. You begin to be in control of your future. So in today's training, I'm going to cover down on this topic of federal buyers ignoring us in 3 different ways. First thing I want to do is just cover down on reasons why they're ignoring you as it relates to inbound. So this means as if they're searching for you and then they ignore you once they may have come across you. The other is if you're reaching out to them, why they're ignoring you. That's outbound, right? So outbound is what we do. Inbound is what the buyer does trying to find us. And so I want to cover it from 2 different angles. And then the last thing I'm going to give you is a few immediate next steps you can take to increase your visibility with federal buyers. It's really important that we take responsibility for the direction we're going. I like to say, take responsibility because it puts you in control. Responsibility is not blame. I'm not saying take blame for why you and buyers aren't connecting. I'm saying take responsibility for why federal buyers are ignoring you. When you learn the reasons why they might be ignoring you and you take responsibility, it puts you in control to make changes that will stop this behavior. But if you wait for them to take control or take responsibility and then take control, it's just never going to happen. They got enough competitors out there that they don't have to improve their process. We need to improve our process. And so that's what we're going to cover down on today. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. That's what you should have when you're reaching out to federal buyers and trying to schedule a meeting, repeatable, predictable results. And if you're not having those, there's probably something with the process, and that's what we're going to cover down on today. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to my newsletter. It's called Government Contracting Success. Inside that newsletter, I provide a lot of content. So for example, a few minutes ago, I just said yesterday's newsletter issue came out. Among other things, I threw in 3 different strategic plans for federal agencies around artificial intelligence, and they're thinking about how do they integrate it into their way of doing business so that they can execute on their mission more effectively. So take a look at that. I also let you know about trainings and a lot of other content out there. For those of you who registered, I think we had over 100 people register for today's training. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. When you register, it is the simplest way to say thank you to me and to my team for putting these trainings on. Also, when you register, LinkedIn goes, hey, let me tell other people about this event. Other people in your network see that you registered, right? I had a couple of people who actually shared it out. That's all great, but if all you do is register for the training, I really appreciate it. I've got 4 more trainings lined up this week you can register for. I'm sure you'd be interested in them because they're all good government contracting tips. And the last thing is never come alone. If you find value in the training, invite a friend. Okay, so let's dive in. I've got 23 minutes to cover 5 hours worth of topic, right? So it's always that way. The first thing I want to talk about is why federal buyers ignore you for an inbound reasons. So when they're looking for potential sellers like you and your company, why are they ignoring you? I'm going to give you a whole bunch of reasons. I'm going to try to manage my time, but talk a little bit about why each reason is important. So the first one is you're just invisible. Right? One of the reasons buyers don't knock on your doors and they ignore you is because you're just not visible. If you're invisible, then how can you expect them to see you? Right? So we want them to be able to see you, and we need to stop this invisibility problem. So one of the ways you might be invisible is you're not where they look. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but they look in certain areas. They look in supplier portals. I've done a whole training you can look at in the past where I talk about where do they look when they go looking for a buyer. They look to people who have responded to sources sought in RFIs. They look to incumbents. Then they begin to move out into tools, right? They look at supplier portals. They look at DSBS. And then maybe they go to SAM and they put out a new RFI or sources sought. So you need to be where they're looking. The second thing I put here is that you're just not findable, right? If you're in there, but what you have doesn't make you pop up in the results, you know what it's like. If you go to Google or Bing or whatever the tools are for search that you use, if you type something in, this is exactly how the buyers search for us. They type something in and they get results. And if you're not coming back in the results, you're invisible. Even if you're registered in SAM, for example, even if you have a website, if you're not coming back, you're invisible. I just did a search on long-range acquisition forecasts as an example in an incognito or private browser, so it wasn't me. And when I did it, the GovCon Chamber comes up in like 4 out of the top 10 results, and the other results are all government. So there's ways to make yourself visible or findable to pop up in the results. In particular, in DSBS, that's the #1 market research tool the federal buyer has. It's the only one mentioned in the FAR, right? The Federal Acquisition Regulation, where it gives guidance to contracting officers, et cetera, on how they can do market research. And I'm not getting into a discussion on that, but my point is it's the place where we register. We register in SAM And for small businesses, DSBS, the Dynamic Small Business Search Tool, those make up your small business profile. And when you don't have a real profile, if all you did was go in there and do the very basics and do required, then you're invisible to the buyer. I don't care that you have a profile. There's over 300,000 small businesses in DSBS. How do you pop up when you're, how do you get seen when you're not even popping up, right? And my goal is to get you even seen in a shorter group. And that's something I put here, right? Is that even if you do have a profile that's put together, if you're using the wrong keywords, then you're invisible when they're searching. You're not findable. And what I mean is a lot of us go in and we just throw these random keywords are really jargon heavy keywords. And we don't think to ourselves, how is the buyer searching for us? First thing you need to remember is it's usually not the technical buyer who is searching for you on DSBS, as an example, in the dynamic small business search. It's usually somebody who has far less sophistication around the work because they're responsible for buying many types of things compared to the director of IT. They know everything about IT, right? And so the keywords you need to use are words that a market researcher might use. And I put two examples here, zero trust architecture and additive manufacturing. And the reason I did is because these are perfect examples of two of our, well, actually like many of our customers, but zero trust architecture, right before I did the training, I just checked again. And when I typed this into zero trust architecture with 300,000, into DSBS with 300,000 small businesses in there, 22 companies are the only ones that come back with zero trust architecture. Zero trust architecture is like one of the biggest buzzwords in cybersecurity and in IT right now in the federal government, yet only 22 companies pop back up. When a federal market researcher is looking for somebody doing zero trust, 22 companies is more than enough to begin doing their market research. They don't go, you know what? I want 50 or 100. They don't want 50 or 100. Then they have to look at 50 or 100. But if they got 22, then that's a breadth. If those 22 are across the country and there's some women and some veteran and some ADA and HUBZone companies, then that's a good pool. 4 of the companies that are out of the 22 are our customers, right? This is just part of what we do with our customers. But I'm telling you, I put that training out for free on the how. So make sure you go look at my past training to see how do I do the keywords correctly. Another one is additive manufacturing. If you type in additive manufacturing, 300,000 keywords or companies come down to 122. And if you say, for example, the buyer goes, well, I wonder if there's women-owned small businesses doing additive manufacturing, and you put that one filter on, or they do, only 2 companies come up, and one of them is our customer, right? And so you need to be thinking about what words would your customer be searching for, and make sure those keywords are inside of DSBS, and then you start increasing your visibility. So number 2, why federal buyers are ignoring you when they're doing their activity, and I've kind of already touched on this already, is you're not attractive. So when I describe visibility, I use 2 words. Are you findable and attractive? Findable means, are you coming up in the results? Attractive means when they look at the results and they look at your company, do they go, yes, that matched my search intent. I was searching for an additive manufacturing company. And when I look at what they say, they're saying that they're a 3D printing company, an additive manufacturing company, right? It makes sense. And so the second bullet here on not attractive is when a buyer looks at a company like yours, if you say that you sell everything, and literally I watch people who sell nothing say that they sell everything, right? You should sell everything once you go north of 100 or 200 million. But before that, right, you should be really focusing down. And if you're under 5 million, you should do one thing and do it better than any of us. And so the problem, when somebody finds you, say you come up in the results, but they look at your profile, they look at your website, whatever it is, and they see that you sell everything, it instantly makes you a not attractive small business because they doubt that you can do everything. And it's no different than if you called a plumber and they said, hey, we do electrical, we do roofing, we'll do your landscaping, we'll do every aspect of the house. It's like, yeah, thanks. I need a plumber. I don't need a person who says they do everything, because even if you could dabble on it, I got a brother who says that, I'll just hire him, right? So you want to focus. And the last thing on not attractive is your keywords and capability narratives don't match. If you go into your DSBS profile, and you should go into it as soon as this training's done. If you go into dsbs.sba.gov and you look at your profile, your keywords are how you get found, right? You come up with the results. And then when you look at your capabilities narrative, this paragraph that's in there, Does that match the keywords you have in? Does that communicate what your company sells? And by the way, it's not just about saying you sell everything. Some people I've noticed, even just yesterday, I was looking at a lot of profiles. When I look, a lot of people just tell me about, hey, we're a woman-owned, veteran-owned company that's been around in Topeka, Kansas, or wherever Topeka is, right? I'm just making this up. But they're saying all these things that have nothing to do with what the search was. The search was, I was looking for zero trust architecture. And when you tell me all about the number of doors you have in your building or how long you've been around, as cool as that sounds, it doesn't help them quickly go, that's a company I want to talk to more about zero trust architecture. Instead, they look more like a company I should talk to when I'm looking for a restaurant in Topeka, Kansas. All right, number 3, throwing off bad vibes. And these are what I call subliminal hints to the buyer to just pass you, right? This idea of when a buyer looks at you, they're shortlisting, they're swinging to the left, swinging to the right, depending on whether you've got what they feel they're looking for in market research. And so I put down 5 examples here, but if you go into the dynamic small business search, and this could be in other marketing assets you have as well. But first thing at the very top, right? One of the questions is, do you accept credit cards? Many people still have no in there because that was the default. But if you say no, then it subliminally tells the buyer, well, if they're not mature enough to be able to take a credit card, how can they take $1 million, right? Make that yes. Generic email addresses. All of us hate info@company.com, right? Or sales. Put a person's name in there. It's a very simple thing. But when it's info, it makes them go, I'm going to move on. Same thing with the website, which is right below the email address. If your website is not secure, even if it is, the worst part for me is people who have HTTP : blah, 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 right? The S is what says it's secure, but people who have the HTTP, when you click on it, it goes to a secure website. Subliminally, you're communicating that my website is not secure because we don't use an S, a security certificate, right? It takes 2 seconds to, one, make your website secure, compliant, and then the second is to update it in DSBS and on your website or on your marketing assets, et cetera. Imagine all these people who are in the federal government who are paranoid about cybersecurity and things like that. They want to know that you're protecting them and protecting them even when they come out to do just market research. This fourth one on the third bullet here, throwing off bad vibes, and this is a big one. There's a whole discussion around it, and I'm not really wanting to walk into the deep end on this, but here's a flag. If you're a woman-owned small business company, make sure that the leaders that are listed, key personnel, I think is the description, make sure that the woman who owns and runs that company is listed first. And usually that person should have the title of president and or CEO. It's a flag to the buyer, especially somebody looking for a woman-owned small business. When they look at the profile and it says it's a woman-owned small business and the president and CEO is a man, there's a vibe there, right? Go read about that and understand it. But most importantly, just fix it. And then the last one is in DSBS. You could put your capability statement in there. There's a link at the top. This is new in the last year, but that now is a subliminal thing. If you don't have a capability statement, then the market researcher is just going to move on. If they've got a bunch of people coming up in the results, they found a bunch of people, they don't want to work too hard on the ones that make them have to chase a capability statement compared to the ones who have it right there. All they have to do is click on it and learn more about you. So that's a good thing. The last thing on why buyers ignore you on the inbound is you're not experienced. While federal buyers sometimes buy from companies that have no past performance or experience at all, that's rare. And it's really a risky move for the government. The right path is for those of us with no experience to subcontract under small businesses, get experience, and then pursue prime contracts. But worse, when you have experience, but you're not putting it in. I went into a company that's doing 10 plus million and none of their experience is in the DSBS profile at the bottom. They're not communicating back to the buyer when the buyer is doing searches that they have the experience. And when you don't communicate that, it makes the buyer walk away, right? They, not in any kind of bad way, but they just look and they go, oh, that's a good company. It does additive manufacturing. And they get to the bottom and there's no entries. Let's not even get to the quality of the entries. There's no entries, yet you have experience. That's a kind of bad thing. So make sure you fix that. Okay, so that's inbound when they're looking. Here, I want to talk about why federal buyers ignore you when you do an outbound. And so this is really more about you, right? It's what we do that we can stop immediately. The other one was things we can fix, but you know, them getting hold of us is up to them. And so in here, I want to begin with, and I didn't put this in order, right? I tried to put this in somewhat order. So don't read it as if it's in order. All of these are standalone reasons on why a federal buyer will ignore you when you're trying to reach out and schedule a meeting, et cetera. The first one, and I think one of the biggest ones, right, is that people spam. I have heard people take my training and then download my directory of 1,000 small business professionals in the federal market and say, yeah, I just emailed them all. What, yesterday? Yeah, it's pretty quick. It's like, what do you, and no one got back to us. Yeah, no kidding. You're lucky you didn't get shut down on the spam filters across the internet. Forget about the agencies you're trying to get into. When you spam, and spamming, it's this thing, right? When you reach out to a whole bunch of people, but you don't do any kind of personalization, you don't think about it. And I don't mean you somehow figured out how to put their name in and their company, right? You know what spam is, you get it and you hate it. So why would we ever do it to the customer? And so one of the biggest reasons we get ignored is because we spam out to tens or hundreds or even thousands of people, every contracting officer I could find. And we're just pushing it out. Spam does not work. I don't care what anybody says. In the federal market, it's not transactional, it's relationships. And so if your very first thing that you're making the impression on with the buyer is to sit there and show them that you care so little that you're spamming them. And my favorite example of this is when you have multiple people you've spammed and they're all sitting around in the same cubicle area. I worked with the Air Force and they were a customer of mine. And I used to walk into the contracting shop and they'd have, 40 or 50 contracting officers all in cubicles. And these were like 4-foot high cubicles, high enough to give you a wall. But if you stood up, most everybody could see across and they could talk to each other. Hey, did you just get in there? I just got that one, right? And God forbid they all have sounds turned on for when an email comes in. I recently heard somebody write an article about how they were a contracting officer and they like blacklisted people if they spammed or did some of the stuff, and then other people were like, "Oh, that's so horrible." I'm like, okay, but how about we recognize the fact that spamming is bad? Let's not do that. All right, I'm off my soapbox on spamming. Number two, a reason I believe buyers ignore you is that you send a capability statement before they're ready, right? In the email, when you're reaching out, you're like, hey, blah, 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 and here's my capability statement. Well, what's the point of a meeting? What's the point of anything? Now they just looked and they go, no, we don't need this. Sales isn't about sending information. Sales is about getting a meeting and having a conversation to understand the customer's needs, their challenges, their goals, et cetera, right? And then beginning to weave it towards your solution. In the federal market, you've got 3 to 24 months to make this happen, right? Anything shorter, you can still respond to a proposal, but you're not going to have a meeting about it. So if it's farther out, you've got time to have a conversation. But your capability statement, when you send it in, you're giving them more reasons to say no. And this is going to be a touch on the threads I give you through the rest of this slide, is you don't want to give them reasons to say no. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to say yes. And by the way, when I'm talking about federal buyers ignore you, I'm pretty much assuming we're both talking about this being when you're trying to reach out and get a meeting, not when you've met them 3-4 times and then they're ignoring you. Then it really is you, or whatever, or they got reasons. But here I'm really trying to focus on the first time you're trying to reach out, why are they ignoring you? So do not send a capability statement, no matter what anybody says. That's not effective sales, right? It might be some places, but that's a way to block you. The more I can look, they go, oh, no, that's not us. It's like, no, I don't want that. So going with that, number 3, right, is using the wrong subject line. Maybe it's too long, or it's too crowded. You need to watch other training I do, but you want to make sure your subject line is pretty short. And the subject line's job, its only job, is to get them to open the email, right? Nothing else. And so in that subject line, like for me, sometimes I like using something where it's obvious that I've done my research. So an example is if I'm trying to reach out to an organization called BES that they work for, BES, and I'm just pulling that out of random. But if I'm trying to get in there, I might say something like AI and BES, or BES's AI strategy for 2024. Right? I might say something like that. It's like, what is that? Let me, just enough to pull it in. And you've got to use your own. Don't use some stocked bunch of lines that I give you or somebody else gives you. You got to go, why am I reaching out to them? How do I get them to open my email? Again, if you're not spamming, then you're thinking about the individual. You're not thinking about, a whole bunch of emails. And then the number 4, and I'm going to try to pick up speed because I'm watching my time here. But number 4, your email's too long. This is a big problem. Open up a long email and tell me if you really read it. I mean, do you really read long emails, especially when the text is collapsed? You just don't do that. And more importantly, people do not. If you're an exception and you love long emails, then congratulations. But people don't do that. And the way you know they don't do that is all you have to do is go to Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, etc. And as you go through those, you will notice what you do. You're scrolling fast. You're looking for something to stop your attention. But even when it stops you and gets your attention, you want to see things in short paragraphs. There's a reason I have bullets. Hopefully these bullets are not too many. My team says I use too many bullets, but even these bullets is literally what your email wants to be like. To give you specifics on the length of an email, make it no more than 2-3 lines at most. And each line really should be trying to keep it like 60 characters long. These very quick sentences that, you're basically trying to get in and have a meeting. If you're trying to just get a question answered, that's even better. But whatever you do not tell them about your company. Nobody cares about you until they know that you care. There's this great line that says, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so when you put all this information into the email that makes it a long email, you're talking about your company. Even if you're talking about all these things you've done, they don't even know who you are, right? So in the beginning, you just want to snap it really fast. I have previous training. You can look at the newsletter article. Maybe somebody will put it into the chat, but go watch it because I talk about how to write emails in the size, et cetera. You just have to search through my past training. Number 5, your emails focus on more than one thing. This is a big thing for me. If you write a RFI response, as an example, and you say, please consider setting this aside to woman-owned or 8A or HUBZone, right? When you say that, your very question's thrown out. Because they're like, oh, well, I had that choice before you sent me an email. So nothing you're saying is helping them. Compared to, imagine if you're a woman-owned 8A HUBZone company and you say, please consider setting this aside to HUBZone. They're like, oh, one for HUBZone, right? Like they check mark that or something. And you're trying to get them to only think about one thing. If they think about multiple things, they'll almost always choose the thing you don't want them to, right? And so that's really important. The email, when you write it, it's the same way for number 5. I always recommend you're trying to get a meeting. That's your first approach. So don't talk about that and then ask other questions because they'll come back and talk about this and push off the meeting down the road. Number 6, on why federal buyers ignore you when you're sending emails and you're doing outbound research. When you reach out to somebody and you try to get them to respond, especially the first time, right? They're going to look into you. They're going to go to LinkedIn. They're going to go to your website. They're going to go to DSBS. And so number 6 is going back to my first point. You're not attractive. They look at your company. They look at your profile and go, that company's not a fit. Number 7, I already kind of talked about when you're just preaching about what you want, not them. And then number 8 is you're not following up, right? Follow up at least 30 times before you give up. I have people I really want to talk to and I get busy and I don't get back to them. And it's important for them not to sit there and give up on me because they're trying to sell me on something. It's like, I want to buy for them. I want to work with them. I'm just busy. And the people you're talking to are busy as well. Make sure you're reaching out on email and voice and phone, right? And doing that multiple times a week, like 2 times, maybe 3, but 2 times a week until you actually get in the door. You can come back and watch the replay, take a shot of this, but basically what I want you to do to improve your visibility and your chances of getting in with a customer right now is improve your visibility. Go to connect.sba.gov and fix your DSBS profile today, right? And then once you're done, get yourself into the supplier portals and somebody will put that into the chat. This one thing I wanted to say, and I'm really tight on time, keep this in mind, right? I say supplier portals. DSBS has 11,000 certified women-owned small businesses, SBA certified, but HHS has their own portal where buyers look there first. And only 3,000 are in there. 8,000 women-owned small businesses are not in HHS, where HHS buyers will probably stop. Why should they come out when there's 3,000? Go get yourself into HHS and the other federal supplier ones out there. And then make sure your capability statement is everywhere. Here's what I want you to remember as you're leaving training today. Federal buyers are ignoring you. If you feel like they're ignoring you, they are ignoring you, but you can take control when you take responsibility for these things I mentioned, making sure you're registered where they're looking. So use this training that I just did. The replays are available immediately. go back, watch it slower, and make sure you're checking off on every one of those 20 plus tips I gave you, and you'll start feeling like they're ignoring you less and you're having more success. Just remember, all of this is about process. Government contracting is not a secret. It is just a process. I'll see you in the next training.